Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Walker. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, sadly, things didn't go the way they wanted to when it came to court. Obviously, they knew this was a good chance of it happening, that Serrano would be able to just walk, mainly because of the Liam situation. It's not enough to fully have made it so that he could get away with everything, but it was enough to shake, the judge's belief on the credibility of the prosecutors and stuff like that. So they end up releasing Serrano. So, and obviously Walker has to make that promise to Denise, because she's right, your brother kind of torpedoed this thing, so can I trust it? He's like, right. He's saying, Mickey taught me the most important thing is the ends don't always justify the means. So he's like, if we're going to take down Serrano, it's going to be by the book, it's going to be the right way. But then Serrano comes out gloating and oh, how's the family? And he's just like, hey, Serrano, I'll be watching you. And she's like, are you good? Because I was like, oh man, this is going to be bad. I think it shows how much growth Walker's going through. No Mickey here to balance him out, but the lesson she taught him is still there. And it's like, I'm going to do this the right way. I'm not going to jeopardize it and make it so that this bastard, this guy who's already set his eyes on me, has his eyes on my family. I can't let this guy just get away because of something I made. So despite his anger and everything, he keeps himself composed. And even Serrano, oh wow, she's got you on a good leash. But screw what Serrano's saying. I think that speaks volume, because I was expecting Walker to hit him and it would have already escalated things, but it's like, no. And he kept his composure throughout the episode, even when he has that sit down with Serrano later on. And I love Serrano's just kind of all up in his face about oh, you won't catch me and stuff like that. But I love that Walker's like, I don't have to worry about it. You can't help yourself. You're going to screw up again. And when you do, I'm going to be there. I'm like, I like that. I like him having that final word, just kind of piecing out afterwards. I'm like, yeah. Because Serrano's such a smug guy. But the thing is, he is impatient. He has some but I don't think he's the criminal mastermind. He's a criminal, a guy with enough connections and stuff that kind of covers his bases. But I think even he gets very impatient in how he wants to handle things. Because his lawyer is like, okay, so he found out about Daniel, because it's right, there was a one of Serrano's guys, in fact the dude that he actually shot in the back to save Liam, quote unquote save Liam. There was there were things from his account, money from his account paying to Daniel, or Daniel money to him, whatever the case may be. I think it was that way around, because Dan bought in for all access to Serrano's cams and stuff. So with that, it's right, he might have some information. He's like, we can handle this a certain way. And Serrano was like, take care of this guy. Get the drive and take care of him. It's because he's we can make a deal. But he's like, no, that's not how I operate. Even though later on he tried to be oh, I'm a businessman. It's given the opportunity, the moment he got what he needed, he was going to kill Dan. Probably wouldn't have gone after the rest of the family, because they don't know anything. Because that was also the thing too. If Denise actually knew anything, and this was his lawyer's point, you wouldn't be sitting right here eating a steak. They would have been all over you if that was the case. So Dan's the only one that's got this information. So, but the fact that Serrano, like I said, it's so it being no, this is how it has to be done. It's you were the criminal mastermind, you would have found a better way. But it's also right, paying him off just won't be enough, because who's to say he doesn't have copies that this still won't blow up in my face in some shape or form. So I think there's an understanding there from the criminal side of things, but still. Upon hearing that Serrano got released, and, Denise is yeah, it kind of sucks. And Dan's like, okay, cool. Which sucks, too, because Dan is a douchebag with all that he's done, all the shady stuff he's done. So Liam was kind of right about it. It still doesn't justify Liam going about things the wrong way that he did, because he was wrong at the time. He's just right about being, unsure about Dan. He was right in that regard. But the thing is, you see the way Dan is with Colton, and you're he's oh man, getting tickets to this indie thing. He's yeah, but I was wondering if I could ask Stella. He was no, go ahead. He's because Colton's I know you don't like her family. He's no, go ahead and ask her. Just don't invite her and her dad over for dinner. But it's seeing him being such a good dad, because even that moment he has later on with Trey, where he talks to Trey about Colton. He's oh, your son's good. And he's great. Obviously, except for that mishap at the parking lot, he's been perfect since. He's great. Whatever you're doing as a father, just keep doing. So it's he's a good dad. Just because you're a good dad doesn't make you a good person. We know he has his checkered past, and I think maybe certain. I mean, I'm sure that this is all. we got inklings of it. They've talked about it a few times that he comes from like a very like messed up background. That's why he latched onto the Davidson so much, because when it comes to family, he didn't have a great example of it. So understandable, but so I'm sure a lot of that is kind of plays into why he is the way he is, but still. And I'm curious if that's something they're ever really going to dive into. I don't know, like I said, just a rough upbringing can instill certain aspects into you, running with their own crew and stuff like that. But it seems like his life has been on a straight and narrow. But part of me wonders, because what Stan said last episode about Gail and me having that same feeling about Gail, like something's off, that she might be stringing along some of those darker elements in Daniel to her own benefit. Who knows? We'll have to ultimately wait and see where things kind of go on that front. But Serrano made sure to come after Dan, and Dan, having heard that from his wife, said, all right, I got the evidence, I got the smoking gun she needs. I love that he was about to write it with his right hand, but he turned it over to his left hand, because it's like, right, it's not his dominant hand. That way he can make sure she doesn't recognize the handwriting. So he ends up trying to mail it off, but before he could, Serrano's boys found him, and he turned to the one person he could turn to, and that was Liam. It's like, cool, you're my lawyer, I have this smoking gun against Serrano, which I love that immediately. It's like, Liam's like, how'd you get this and stuff like that. He's like, I knew you were a bad guy. It's like, right, the only way you wouldn't have been able to get this is if like, the fact is you don't want anyone to know. It's like, fine, like, I'll give you this stuff, but you can't let my identity be out there, because I don't want Denise to know I'm involved in all of this. Obviously, I don't want your brother knowing I'm involved in all this. So if you can give me an immunity deal for previous crimes and this, then we're good. So Liam has to spin this, and it's like, right. And he's like, if you like screw this up, I'll deny everything. You're already in the like the doghouse when it comes to your situation. So if you screw this up, you're going to just be the lawyer that cried wolf, and you'll probably destroy whatever little remains of your career. So Liam reluctantly has to take this side of things. So brings it to Walker, James, and Denise, and it's like, right, but my client doesn't want to say who they are. He justified by being like, there's a lot of leaks, and we know what happens to anyone that gets caught up in Serrano's crosshair. So it's like, all right, fine. So Denise is reluctant, but she's like, I hope you know what you're doing, Liam. And part of me is like, the fact that she said that, I was like, oh god, this is going to come back to bite Liam, isn't it? But in the end, it all works out still. Granted, it's touch and go there. So, but Serrano, being who he is, reaches out to Dan. Is like, yo, give me this stuff. If you don't, I'll come after your family. He's like, if you try to touch it, hey, nothing's going to happen to your family yet, because we haven't made a deal yet. So I need you to bring this to me. So he tries to back out of the deal. Like, I get it. Liam would understand it if he was someone else. If it was someone else, he'd be understanding, like, right, your family's in danger. But it's also like, right, you doing this, how do you guarantee that Serrano won't come after you? But he quote-unquote planned for that, because he was like, right, like, I've taken insurance. It's like, if something happens to me, and he's like, oh yeah, look at you, like, trying to be all big and everything. It's like, yeah, fine, whatever. But so he had some insurance policy set in place. Like, I guess if he died, like, the information still got put out there. But it's also because he went into it being like, yeah, how do I know for sure that you won't come after me? He even says, like, oh, like, if I go to prison, I still have enough connections to make stuff happen. And him being free and out about, like, he was already dead set on want you dead. His lawyer's the one that was telling him to do business with you. So it's like, the moment you handed it over, Serrano was going to kill you. Once again, whether he was going to kill your entire family, I don't know. It probably drew too much attention killing the DA, but killing her husband, that's one thing. And even if she had all the feelings in the world, like, oh, he's responsible for killing my husband, it's like, yeah, but you won't have any proof. And knowing Serrano, he wouldn't do it himself. He'd probably outsource it, like he did the Walker hit. Still, who knows? Because we're living in the lane of what ifs. But I do love that when he called up Liam to back out, Walker knows his brother so well. It's like, look how agitated my brother is. The client is backing out, but he's like, I know exactly. We both know who it is. And James is like, what? He's like, yeah. Whoever it is, Liam only takes clients if he thinks they're innocent. Whoever this is someone he doesn't think is innocent. It's someone that he thinks is a bad guy. And who's the one person that fits that description? I was like, look at you, Walker, putting it together. You know your brother enough to immediately know who the client is. So he put like an APB out for following following Dan's vehicle. He knew exactly who to, so once again, who knows how that whole thing would have gone. Plus, this also let them keep the evidence about Serrano, because if Dan had given it to him, it would have like gotten destroyed, obviously. But luckily things went sideways for Serrano. Walker like had a whole tack team behind him, so it's not like Walker went into this alone going cowboy style. He's like, nah, like, because Serrano might be armed up, so brought in the cavalry and everything, so things went perfectly well. And ultimately it turned into like, a chase sequence, which I love. That like Walker's like, I told you were gonna screw up, Serrano, like pull over, this is it. But Serrano like got his gun, and it's almost like a let's shoot at each other, but then like Walker pulls back, Serrano crosses across a four-way, gets sideswiped by a truck. Sadly, that bastard Serrano doesn't get to live. He dies. I was like, okay, Walker, like, hopefully it doesn't turn into a situation where you have to kill him, because obviously he wants to take him to jail, but in that moment, Serrano's like, yeah, that's not my style. He's like, be seeing you. Now, and Walker's just kind of like, damn, it sucks, because he wanted Serrano, like, considering, like, Serrano, like, put a target on him and his family. It's like, no, I want you in jail. Like, this is true. Like, you're getting off too easily, you got to pay for all your crimes. But I think it's also just because it's like, I interpret that a way that I don't know if that's the way the show meant for it to be interpreted. I kind of took that as do you think it's kind of hinting that Serrano might have, well, he was already gunning for a second hit on Walker. We already got that, but could he have already set some of that in motion? He might have already paid someone. I mean, he had just gotten out of jail, so I don't know if he had time to really do that. But in case he ever died, if things ever went sideways, he's probably got people, like, he's probably got contingency set up, like, in the event of my death, all these certain things, get activated. So there could be someone still coming after Walker. He did talk about, sending a second hitter after Walker, but it might not have happened yet, because that was before he got arrested. So who knows if he already put in another hit, and that's just kind of being activated now that he's gone. But now it's about dealing in the aftermath, because luckily, Dan got out of there before Walker could see him, but Walker got there in the first place following Dan, so he already knows what's what. And so Dan's there with Liam, and Liam's like, yep, you got your immunity deal and everything. He's like, even though Serrano's dead, it's like, yep, because everything you gave us still panned out. So we have all the evidence that Denise is going to have to break down and, find, like, dismantle the rest of, like, Serrano's organization with what she has. Yeah, but and then Dan's, like, reaching out for a handshake. I love Liam's almost like, are you stupid? Why would I shake your hand? You're not a good guy. Like, don't get that twisted. But I love that he's basically like, I saved your life, Liam, so you owe me a lot. Well, I'm like, that's scummy. In this situation where he's helping you out, he doesn't like, yes, he doesn't like you, he doesn't trust you, he doesn't think you're a good guy. So what? The fact is that you had to come back, but like, you owe me a lot more because I saved your life. That was scummy. At the time, you want to pretend like, oh, it was nothing. It wasn't that big deal. I was at the right place at the right time. And now you're trying to use that against him. Like, you owe me. Like, he's doing you a favor, like, by not letting your wife find out the truth about you. But I love Liam gets in the final word. Actually, how did you know about, like, the only way you could have gotten access to that is if you were connected to Serrano in some shape or form. Like, that's the thing. You knew what was going on, but you wanted to take advantage because of, like, your family. Once again, I think Gail knows about this. I think she's actually the one that convinced Dan to do it, because I feel like Dan would never make, I've said this before in the past, but like, there's no way Dan would ever make any moves in that family without letting her know, because she's his mother-in-law, but she is still like a mother to him. So it's just like, there's no way she's not involved in some of those decision-making choices that Dan made. So she's just as culpable, because she wanted dirt on the Walker family to kind of use shade against them about this whole barn fire / Marv's death, right? So that's still been my justification for why he did what he did, like why that came out of nowhere like that. I mean, to know to even go looking for it was just kind of interesting, not unless he found it and then like stumbled and brought that up to get whoever came to who first about it. Still, other than that though, Liam did kind of bring it up of like, yeah, like, were you shooting that guy in the back to save me or yourself? Because he's like, right, killing someone in defense is one thing. Like, you were defending me, you were saving my life, sure. But killing someone to cover up a crime is something else differently, because it's about if he gotten arrested, he would have blabbed about all that you did just to save his own ass. Especially, it would have had even more juice behind it, because Daniel, who is the husband of the DA, like, that would have been like extra juice he could like pull from that situation to make his situation a little bit better. So I'm like, yeah. So Liam's kind of got you the rights too. Like, yeah, you don't get to walk away with some smug victory, you bastard. Like, Liam got you. He knows you. And so I really love too that Walker's sitting there thinking about it, and Denise is like, oh, you got other stuff on his mind? It's like, yeah, you do. We both have an idea who that informant is. She's like, that client of Liam. She's like, no, I don't really. It's like, I know it's because it's a certain. I knew because I got to Serrano because I follow a person, and Walker's like, "You're sleeping with the enemy, DA," and I'm like, "Yo!" And even later on, because like her and Daniel are working to be in a better place. He was like, "Yeah, once you get Serrano arrested, like then you and me can think about us and work on us." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And then in the end, he's trying to touch her hand, and she pulls away. He's like, "Are everything okay?" She's like, "Yeah, things are fine." It's like, now she's starting to see, like, wow, like, you were involved in all of this. Like, now the thing is, once again, none of them know his involvement. Yes, he only bought into this situation, but he still knew what was going on, and he didn't let anyone know. His wife, Walker, like, yes, he had his own reasonings for it, and that's what we're going to really dive into, of what was the justifications for a lot of that. But still, that's definitely going to complicate things. Things are even more complicated because Denise is looking through the evidence, and looking through it, she ends up finding out that Walker was talking to his mom, and he's like, yeah, I left that lantern there. He's like, I'm the reason why Marv died. Now, is that admissible? I don't know, because also it's a complicated thing of it was illegally recorded. So him saying that, like, I don't know if she's going to be able to use that for family reasons and stuff like that, his confession. Once again, I don't think Walker's responsible. There's still more to this story, obviously. Because even Liam's kind of looking into it a little bit because of what Stan said last episode about looking into the past stuff. Because he was looking at those maps. And I think one of those maps is probably one of those things that Stan told him to get last episode. I think it's probably like, I didn't really focus on it too much, because obviously it's not the biggest focus of the episode. But I'm assuming it's probably about like property, like lines and stuff like that, who owned what at what point in time. And I'm assuming this has something to also do with that map that August and them found. Either way, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how, circling back to it, just how Denise handles all that going forward. There's like so many things on so many different fronts. The Walker front, the whole situation with her husband, and well, they're already in a rocky place. They were in a better place, and now this is going to put them back in a rockier place, and how much of an effect this is going to have on Colton, which that ties into like a subplot in this episode where August, in an attempt to impress a girl, Faye, she's like, oh, you're in a band? He's like, yeah, totally. What did I get myself into? So he ends up forming a band with Colton. And actually, Colton's actually the one who writes the lyrics for their songs because he needed them. Obviously, Jerry gave Walker the rundown. It's like, wait, so like there's Todd and Stella, and then August and everything, him and Faye. And I think for Walker, it's like, for him, it's like he's happy because despite everything that his children has been through, they're thriving. And, but for him, he was scared at the time because it's like this Serrano thing. It could always come making his world come crashing down, and that involves everyone around him. So obviously he was worried about that. But Jerry's like, or, Stella could graduate, and then August could continue to like steal, hearts and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, things can work out too. Yeah, there's a possibility of things going bad, but also focus on the good that could happen. So. But getting Todd on stage to sing, and when you hear, like, obviously Todd's asking, he's like, oh, so, like, who was the muse for this? He's like, what? It's like, no, Todd's like, who was the muse for your music? He's like, I don't know, it's just lyrics, bro. He's like, no, it sounds like it's a girl. It's about a girl and stuff like that, right? You're like, yeah, it's definitely about Stella, which I was like, that's going to be interesting because you see that definitely there's a Stella and Todd thing going on. I'm like, oh, man, that's going to be complicated. But as Jerry said, at least she's not meeting someone at a community service place type of thing, circumstances. But when it's all said and done, though, he wanted to invite her to like the thing, but like the moment Todd and August perform and do their thing, and Todd's singing, and he's looking at Stella because he's like, oh yeah, this is dedicated to the ladies that brighten up the world a little bit, obviously referencing Faye and Stella. And in that moment, Colton kind of felt bad, so he had the ticket out ready to ask her, but he didn't, which I thought was really sweet. Jerry being there for him. She's like, I understand that, it's always a little harder, like, as kids that are adopted. And he was like, wait, you're adopted? It's like, oh, I don't know. I don't think that ever came up about Jerry last season. That's interesting. Maybe that's why also her and Hoyt hit it off so well, because they have the whole, like, well, their family circumstances are a little complicated of their own, like, Hoyt had his complicated family circumstances, but so does she. So maybe that kind of lends itself a little bit more to some of their relationship. Maybe that's kind of what they bonded over a little bit. But either way, it's always harder being the new kid, essentially. And Jerry was like, right, like all you have to do is kind of like tell her how you really feel, essentially, kind of have to put it out there. He's like, yeah, but what happens afterwards? And she's kind of like, well, you'll see how things go. He's already made his move, so you have to make yours. So Colton's like, yeah, thanks, I will. We'll see if he does. But I think it's interesting because it does kind of feed into the whole thing between Jerry and Walker, because immediately afterwards, Jerry looks at Walker. It's like, there's complicated things there. There's something there, and they've discussed it a little bit, and that's kind of gotten shut down a little bit by Jerry because she was dating someone else at the time. We don't know if that's still ongoing, but it's there, and Jerry still feels it. Walker still feels it. It's like they're very important to each other, and just it's gonna be interesting. I hope they do get together because I think they would be very sweet together. So, but I think it is the thing of like, right, the actor, like what happens afterwards is always going to be that complicated thing. So don't want to ruin what you have, even though like what you have is kind of complicated, because yeah, like those feelings are there on both fronts, and just the question then becomes like, and like, what do you do with that, because them just staying the regular friends that they are can't really go forward with like these feelings like budding between them and being buried deep within. So it's gonna be interesting to see on all fronts how this ultimately all ends up playing out. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.